Hey everybody, how was your Christmas? So it's the 31st of September. This means that this is the last video for this year again. Guys, thanks so much for being here for the last 2, 3 years now that I've had Patreon. It's been an epic journey. I think there's like 400 something videos now of just mixing videos, and you know it's okay to ask the same questions over and over because whatever, like, if somebody is coming in new now, they're gonna see more shit about compression. Remember, there is also the little tab so you can see all the videos about compression, but it's always fun to talk about compression, isn't it? So, we got 2 questions that are both about compression. We have Wesik, saying that he bought the Valve compressor, which is obviously a sexy, awesome compressor, and then we have Suzanne going like, "Dude, I understand compression, but I never know when to use a compressor," which is kinda the same as Wesik. He's saying, "Look, I got the Valve compressor, it sounds absolutely epic on the drums, but do you use the compressor anywhere else? Also, why does the Valve sound so different? Blah, 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 blah. And when do you use it on other buses and why? And et cetera, et cetera." So let's just have a good old compression talk to end the year. Or maybe you're watching this tomorrow with a massive hangover. So let's start with the concept of a compressor. So, the only thing a compressor does is control volume. It doesn't do anything else. So, when I always see it like this. Back in the day, yeah, they would have to ride volume automatically, like no, with the fader. Ride the volume with the fader, and then you are the compressor then. So there is a signal that's coming out, and you're like, oh, the vocals need to go up here, and then they need to go down there, and they need to go back up again. Or with violins, it's too quiet. There's so much noise floor. You have to push it and push it down. Then you're listening to it. So you're the threshold. And then when you hear something's not good, the threshold is activated. And then depending on how fast you move up and or down the fader, is your attack and release mixed in with your threshold. With no mixed in with your knee because you can go really soft or a little bit harder. And then you also have your look ahead time, which you could also see as you're the compressor because you already know how the song is going to go and you know ahead of time what's going to happen. So you're going to be able to make a smoother transition. And if you don't know the look ahead time, it won't be as smooth. It'll be a little bit more jagged. Okay, so look ahead times, 10 milliseconds is going to sound smoother. The compressor is going to be able to look ahead, so it will adjust itself a little bit faster. And shorter look ahead times, like 0 milliseconds, will be less smooth. They'll be more jagged. So short, you can go louder, you get a little bit more distortion. Fast, um, s yeah, so 0 would be, more distortion, things like that, a little bit louder, and, slower look ahead time would be a little bit smoother. Speaking of distortion, that is also, in a way, a little bit of a gray area to a compressor because you're jacking off the little things, the waveform. Doesn't matter. So, let's get into, more compression stuff, and answer more of, Wesik's question. Wesik asking when you use it on your drum bus, right? And do you use anything on your bass or your harmonics or your vocals buses? So I'll just tell you the compressors that I use if I use them. The first one would be a Valve compressor. I always give that a shot. This one, generally speaking, it works. I put it into the Valve Man master bump and then take the compression amount down because it's always stupid. I adjust the input and the output. The reason why it has an input and an output is because there is no threshold knob. So the more you put into it, the harder it will start working. That's basically the more you put the threshold down, the harder the little dude will start pushing the volume up and down. So that's the threshold knob pretty much. Then I'll open up this button. I'll use a sidechain tilt if it's reacting too much to the kick drum. So that's how you can do that. Sidechain tilt means that there's a EQ that's going to be put in front of the compressor, and it will then start listening to that EQ instead, and it will start reacting more to the top end. Give that a shot, and then I'll use the wet dry amount to kind of set it nice. So it's just the preset I start with, but it ends up being something completely different every single time. Attack and release. Generally speaking, I'll leave him alone on the master bus, on the drum bus here, because it'll sound pretty good in one go. But slower attack time means more of the transient comes through. Faster attack time means less of the transients comes through. There we go. Slower release time means that the compressor will start breathing more, and the tail of your reverbs that you've used in your drum bus will become more and more apparent, and it will be like like that. And faster will be louder, higher chance of distortion, and it will be in a way kind of cleaner. You have to find a middle ground, but generally speaking, 1-to-1 here works for me. Okay, so that's this compressor. Other compressors I'll use on drum bus would be I like the DBX 160, and I use it in parallel because that's just a nice little thing to try out. I tried this one out as well. If the drums don't have enough low end, then my secret setting is I put the tape emulation on 7.5. Take this one, put it on 64 or 45, and turn it down about 45 dB. And I'll take this little spreader, and that's it. I won't use any compressor. Generally speaking, that sounds pretty sick. So for sub bass, I will generally have this split up into two, having the top end and the low end, and then sometimes I will use saturation here. And if the sub bass has massive plucks to it, so it goes so really hard plucks, I'll use a limiter. I'll just use the Ableton limiter, which is in its own right a compressor as well. But I'll just use the ceiling and put that down until I don't have that initial and then it depends on how much of that comes through. The reason I do that is because on the overall master, I need my compressor the final limiter, to not start reacting like crazy to the bass of the track. I need it to react just a little bit to keep it as clean as possible. Okay, so that's what I'll use on a bass. Then we have harmonics. So it's basically, this comes to bass means a little bit saturation, a little bit of limiting if I have that problem. For harmonics, I'm using this trick a lot where I have an envelope follower here for vocals, and then there's a little bit of vocal space. Here, let's just have a little listen.
When you say you always love me,
Sorry, it's a little bit loud.
but I don't feel it when you won't even call. I can't feel it, baby. Where's this love that you say you have for me? Whoa, I can't touch it, baby. Seems like nothing ever really.
So I just find where the main vocal is, and then I set up a envelope follower here and set it to the thing over here. Now, and then just put it on the harmonics. It's just a little space thing. You can also use what's it called? Nectar 3 has a thing in it as well where it takes away what's called relay. It does the same thing. You also have track space from Wave Factory, but I can't really be bothered, and this is way faster to set up, and I've used a little amount knob. So that's a new thing. As for harmonics itself, if I find that the harmonics are like annoying, I'll use a CLA 2A, and that's only for volume control. So I'll find wherever the track is playing back and it's sitting really good, and that's basically it. I'll set the gain knob here so that I have about like this much compression going on, like a tiny little bit. And then if a filter starts opening up of a synthesizer somewhere in there, so what generally happens with presets is that they have a filter like this. If it starts opening up, this compressor has a internal sidechain set up already in one go, and it will start reducing the volume, the more the filter opens up. So it'll go down and down and down. And generally speaking, it'll go about -4, -5 dB down when the filter starts opening up. So that's another compressor that I use, generally speaking, on anything that has lots of filter stuff going on, because I don't feel like volume automating everything. I'd rather that this just volume automates for me. If I still find that it gets too loud, I'll put a limiter on it. So compress limit. Limit means it'll do a little bit more. All right. Next up, if I find that the harmonics tend to just be really thin and the drums are really overtaking everything, it's a pretty cool trick to use. I use a send, and I will use a harder or faster compressor. And I like faster compressors like this. I just set it up really hard, like that ish, depending. So slower attack, maybe. But I'll set up to something like this. I'll send in the harmonics or anything that has harmonic content. Send it up over here, and then I'll use an imager. Uh, okay, is this one? And I'll set this up with the stereoize button, the little #1 mode, set this up like that. And then I'll use parallel compression, but the parallel compressed signal, it will be made thicker. But it's only if you have a really thin little harmonic section. Then I will spread that out, and then the whole harmonics will kind of sit and make everything fatter for the whole track. It's a nice little trick as well. But generally speaking, I try not to do too much processing. I always try to kind of keep it super easy and no stress. But compressors are more used for like problems. And with the drums, I just like it breathing really, really hard. Now, when to use a compressor on the master? Am I using one? Yeah, I am. Um, so what's nice about compressors on the master is that you can kind of, let especially with the EDM type of stuff, you can kind of control the amount of low end that goes through. Because normally the kick drum goes boo, 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 and just constantly. And you want the whole track to kind of bounce around a little bit together. So it's like a volume controller. And I'll use a glue compressor with around this setup. And then you can do this with an internal sidechain. But then the overall result is always that it will compress the entire signal. And I wanted to compress specifically to the kick.
When you say yo, I can see your heart. I can see your heart.
It's a super minimal thing. Don't really have to like freak out about that too much. But those are all my compressor settings that I tend to use for 2021. So let's go and do one fun last thing. Okay, we're gonna go and open up a new set, and I'll explain a compressor the easiest way possible, and that's the way you already understand it. That is via ADSR. So a compressor is volume control, right? Now, can theoretically see it as ADSR. So ADSR means that if I have this serum patch here and I set up a note, the C2 note, go, boop, looks amazing. And we just play that back. Wow. Just put that up one more. Okay. With ADSR, you can make this more into a pluck sound, right? So ADSR is this is the envelope. And let's just say that we wanted to pluck it more. So we'll take the decay and the sustain down. And now the first transient comes through. So we came from this sound. Now we use the ADSR, and now we're at this sound. You can do the exact same thing with a compressor. So I'll set my knee hard. I'll set my look at time pretty hard. We'll put it in linear mode, so it's harder, 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 hard. I'll set the attack time a little bit slow. I set my release time a little bit slower as well. And now we compress it pretty hard. Wait, which one am I doing? This one? So now let's have a listen over here. That's a little bit too much. And now I can A/B the two of them, and I can set my compressor. So the sounds are almost the same. It already sounds the same. Remember, so see that, like, see just that it's just ADSR. That's all it is. It's an ADSR control. And then on top of understanding that you can do this with a compressor, so volume controlling to do sound design in a way, you can see it like if you do this to an entire track, you can get like it to really be transient heavy. So if you really need like ticky kick drums and you really need to emphasize that type of sound, then you can set up a compressor so that you have a slower attack and you set your release according to like that it's a little bit of a gate type of sound. So that means like 20, 30-ish. Now, if you want it to breathe more, and you want the the drums to come through even more, you set your attack time slower. Because when you set it slower, you're just gonna get the sound. Hold on, let's go over here again with the ADSR. Slower would mean you just get more body coming through. And then more body coming through means that it gets a little bit fatter. If you set your release slower here as well, because of the the reverbs and the overheads and the blah blah blahs, you can get the whole thing to go, and it's really, really nice to have. So that's basically it. It's a volume controller, and you set the ADSR to whatever you want for the signal. I hope this video was fun, and yeah, see you guys for the next one in the new year. Much love. Take care. Peace out.